The peaceful morning air in Ethan's mountain cabin was shattered by the sound of shattering glass. His heart raced as he ran toward the window, only to see two women and a man sneaking around the porch, carrying clipboards and phones. The HOA? Here? In the middle of nowhere? It didn't make sense. They had sent warnings before, letters about non-compliance, threats about fences, and warnings to maintain cabin aesthetics. But a full-blown break-in was a new level. Ethan froze for a moment, watching their movements, sensing that something bigger was at play. He grabbed his phone, considering calling the police. But instinct told him to hold on. Something about their hurried, anxious movements hinted they weren't entirely confident. They were bluffing, but in person, their bluster could intimidate anyone. Ethan stepped quietly into the cabin's main hall, thinking fast. He had no backup, no security system installed yet, just the faint hum of the mountain wind and the forest around him. Then he remembered the promise he had made years ago to always be ready, just in case someone underestimated his cabin's legacy. Little did the HOA know, Ethan had an unexpected guest scheduled for that day, a figure no one would expect to intervene. Their arrogance in breaking into his home would soon become their greatest mistake. The tension in the air thickened, the mountain's silence broken only by the faint crunch of leaves under their hurried steps. Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes trained on the intruders. He recognized them immediately, the HOA president, a sharply dressed woman named Claire, and her assistant, carrying a small stack of papers. The third figure, a man in a loose blazer, seemed nervous, checking his phone repeatedly. He didn't panic. Instead, he observed, noting their movements and the sloppy way they tried to cover their tracks. His mind raced. They weren't expecting resistance, certainly not from someone who knew their tactics intimately. Years ago, his grandfather had warned him, people who underestimate quiet places often pay the highest price. Ethan never forgot those words. And today, he would put them into practice. As the HOA prowled near the kitchen, Ethan made a decision. He reached under a cabinet and pulled out a folder of documents, deeds, permits, property lines, everything proving the cabin and surrounding land belonged solely to him. More than that, it contained agreements with local authorities granting him certain rights over any HOA interference in this zone. The intruders didn't yet know the full extent of his preparedness. They assumed fear would silence him, that threats alone could bend his will. Ethan smiled faintly. The tables were about to turn, and the outcome would be a lesson in patience, strategy, and unexpected allies. The soft sound of footsteps on the porch caught the HOA's attention. They froze, glancing nervously toward the cabin door. Ethan grinned behind the counter. It was time. Suddenly, a figure stepped into the cabin, a tall, composed man with a presence that radiated authority. Ethan's longtime friend and personal bodyguard, Marcus, had arrived, though the HOA had no idea he existed. His calm gaze swept over the intruders, unflinching. Claire's eyes widened. The intruders hadn't counted on anyone protecting Ethan, especially not someone capable of handling their intimidation with ease. Marcus spoke softly but firmly, "I suggest you leave. Now." The HOA members froze. Every threat they had prepared evaporated in the weight of Marcus's presence. The papers, the clipboards, the rehearsed intimidation, all meaningless against someone trained to neutralize tension without a single aggressive move. Ethan stepped forward, holding the property deeds in one hand. "You've already violated multiple local ordinances by entering my property without permission. But I'll make this simple: leave peacefully, or we escalate legally." Their confident facade cracked. Panic and confusion filled their eyes. They had assumed control, authority, fear, all illusions, shattered in the span of seconds by an unexpected ally and undeniable proof. The HOA stumbled backward, mumbling excuses, glancing at one another for guidance. They had thought this would be simple: threaten, intimidate, collect fines. Instead, they faced legal documentation and a man whose presence alone neutralized their intimidation. Ethan remained calm, letting Marcus's quiet authority fill the room. The HOA president tried to assert control verbally, "We have the right to," but her voice faltered. Marcus's gaze never wavered, and even the assistant looked ready to flee. Ethan motioned toward the front door. "You're leaving. Now. And if you return without proper notice, authorities will be involved." Claire swallowed hard. She realized for the first time that this cabin, this property, was untouchable by her office. The documents confirmed it, and the physical presence of Marcus ensured there would be no confrontation. Their plan to intimidate had completely backfired. As they hurriedly exited, Ethan couldn't help but notice the shocked expressions. They had underestimated the quiet cabin, the hidden strength, and the prepared mind within. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind, "Never underestimate the calm before the storm." But the story wasn't over. There were still consequences to manage, letters to send, and a lesson to ensure this kind of intrusion would never happen again. The HOA retreating left Ethan and Marcus standing in the cabin, the tension slowly easing. But Ethan knew they might regroup, try again, or escalate through legal loopholes. He needed a permanent solution. He spent the next hours drafting letters to local authorities, detailing the violation of property rights and unlawful entry. Every document reinforced his control over the land, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Marcus assisted, ensuring the cabin was secure and that evidence of the intrusion was preserved. The sun streamed through the large windows as Ethan reviewed his plans. This cabin had always been a sanctuary, a place of peace and solitude. Now, it had also become a fortress, both legally and physically. The HOA had made a grave mistake in underestimating him, and he intended to make sure no one repeated it. Neighbors, curious about the earlier commotion, passed by cautiously. Ethan waved, signaling calm. The incident had been unsettling, but it had also revealed something important. Strength could be quiet, presence could be commanding, and preparation could turn the tables completely. He knew the HOA would remember this day, and they would think twice before crossing boundaries again. The following week, Ethan sent formal letters to the HOA board, including a detailed account of the intrusion, copies of the deeds, and photographic evidence. The message was clear: attempts at intimidation were futile. Word began to spread. Other homeowners who had faced minor harassment from the HOA began expressing relief and curiosity. Ethan's response had set a precedent, showing that knowledge, preparation, and allies could overcome arbitrary authority. Meanwhile, Claire attempted to salvage her image, calling meetings and sending emails. But her attempts were feeble against the undeniable facts. The cabin was untouchable, and Ethan's unexpected guest had left a lasting impression. Every interaction reinforced one truth: fear only works if people allow it. The HOA had miscalculated, and the outcome had been a dramatic reversal of power. As the sun set over the mountains, Ethan stood on the porch, Marcus beside him. They watched the horizon, the cabin silent except for the wind and distant birds. The lesson was clear: vigilance, preparation, and allies could turn even the most intimidating adversary into a defeated one. Weeks later, the HOA attempted a formal challenge in court. But every step was blocked by the evidence Ethan and Marcus had gathered: deeds, permits, and documented intrusion. The judge dismissed the case, citing repeated violations by the HOA members themselves. Ethan watched from his porch as Claire and her team left the county offices, defeated and humbled. The cabin remained untouched, a symbol of resilience and preparedness. Marcus, always calm, gave a rare smile, satisfied with a job well done. Neighbors now looked at the cabin with newfound respect, realizing that even against seemingly powerful organizations, courage, planning, and unexpected support could triumph. And as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ethan whispered quietly, "Some guests arrived just in time to change everything." And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.